As we've heard people say over and over again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of good. I want to suggest that while the proposal that we are supporting today could be far better, it is far better than what we were given in the first place in the executive budget. We are constrained by the parameters of the executive budget, and I, for one, believe that we should challenge that lawsuit that was known as Silver versus Pataki, because we are constrained by the way the governor shapes the original budget. And I believe that the Assembly proposal is stretching the envelope, is doing a lot of what we're able to do, given the constraints that were given to us by the Court of Appeals. I support this proposal, and I'd like to give a few reasons why. First of all, when we talk about raising revenues to pay for what we believe should be done on behalf of the people of the state of New York, this proposal makes the revenue raising much fairer. We are saying to those who have benefited by the state of New York's environment and business environment and community involvement, that they who have made more money and are continuing to make more money will have to pay their fair share. The concept of a pied-à-terre tax, the concept of taxing multimillionaires a little bit more money, is a progressive approach to making sure that we raise enough money to do what we need to do for everybody in our community. I heard a comment about we're going into an economic downturn, and therefore we should not tax more, but tax less. I challenge that. We hear from economists all of the time that when you're going into an economic downturn, that's when government should be doing more. That's when government should be helping our communities more and stimulating economic activity, not cutting back on what government does. Let us go to one of the biggest subjects that we have to deal with, which is education. I heard one of my colleagues say that we are spending too much money on education. I don't think we can spend too much education on investing in our future. The problem we have in this state is an imbalance. Our property taxpayers are paying too much, and the state is contributing too little. And we need to reverse that. Right now, my estimate is the state pays about 1/3 of the total cost of education in the state of New York, while our local governments, our local municipalities, our school districts are contributing 2/3 of the cost of education. It should be the other way around. And we need to move in that direction, and we need to have a fairer way of funding schools in this state. Economic development. We've all had discussions about how the economic development programs seem to be the play toy of the executive branch. And we've heard pushback from our constituents. Why are we throwing money at large corporations that are not producing the jobs that they promised to produce? We have one number somewhere, there's $700 million was invested in Buffalo, and we got 700 jobs back. I'm not against investing in Buffalo, I just want a better return. Economic development should mean jobs for people in our communities, not money going to shareholders of big corporations or the officers of those big corporations. So I am pleased that our proposal includes items that would make the economic development programs of this state far more transparent, where we'll have a database of deals, where we will require the REDCs to fill out the same forms that every one of us has to fill out. We just appropriate the money. They're the ones who spend it. They're the ones whose shoulder we have to look over to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. So the Assembly is moving in the right direction when we're dealing with economic development programs. There's another area that many of you know I'm very concerned about, and that's how we treat people with mental illnesses and people with disabilities. And I'm very disappointed that over the last 8 years or so, we have seen a continuation of a trend that started earlier to decrease the services for our most vulnerable. Whether they are people who were born with disabilities, whether they were people who had brain injuries, or whether there are senior citizens who are deteriorating. This state has abandoned those people. We in the legislature every year have fought back, but we're not there yet. If you take a look at early intervention, you will see that at one time, Governor Mario Cuomo set up a model program, a program that would reach out to infants, to have them assessed, and to make sure that we could help them fulfill their abilities, however limited they may be. And the people who do this kind of work will tell you that a child that's 3 months old should not have to wait a month to get services. Once they're analyzed, once they're assessed, those services should be available immediately. 1 month for a 3-month-old is 1/3 of his or her life. And if you get a child early enough, in their first few years, as soon as they're assessed, you can make a big difference. They might not end up in special education. They might not end up in a group home. They might actually be turned around and put on a path that allows them to fully function in our communities. In the last several years, we have seen that for the first time, we have waiting lists for early intervention. It has grown worse and worse as changes were made in the way we fund early intervention. I am pleased that we are restoring or adding to a 5% increase in pay for those who provide these services. That's a very small amount considering that the early intervention providers have not had a raise in about 10 or 20 years. The governor proposed a limited raise. We, in our proposal, make sure that that raise is across the board for all of the services for these infants in the early intervention program. When it comes to K through 12, I was appalled to see that the governor once again proposed that the schools could save money on the backs of kids who had IEPs, individual education plans. I was appalled to see that the governor would allow the schools to waive the requirements for how we treat these kids with disabilities. We in the Assembly have rejected that, as we have in the last several years, and we're saying to the schools that if a child needs a service, you have to provide that service. When we talk about higher education, we've had students asking for money. We had a rally outside talking about how we need to help kids with special needs in college, in higher education, in post-secondary schools, in community colleges. And the Assembly is putting money in for mental health services, which is desperately needed to help kids work their way through college, kids who might face some challenges. In addition, when you get beyond that, when we talk about transition services, the governor suggested that we delay a cost of living increase for the people who deal one-to-one with our most needy. The Assembly rejected the governor's proposal to delay the cost of living increase. And we've added 2% for reimbursement for the cost of direct support personnel. And we've also rejected the governor's proposal to undo a system that has been working in consumer-directed personal assistance. All of us want the government to function as efficiently as possible. But the proposals that the governor has suggested just don't improve the system. They save money by making it more difficult for the people who need services to get those services. The job of government is to deliver services as efficiently and as effectively as possible. We are trustees of the money of our taxpayers, but we should not be resorting to saving money by making it impossible for somebody who has a disability or has a mental illness to access the services that are there. And I respectfully suggest that was the governor's plan with respect to CDPAP. We've got to find a better way to streamline those services, not make it impossible for people to access them. So I'm very pleased to be able to support this proposal. There are still a lot of things that we have to do, but this is a very good step in the right direction, and I urge my colleagues to support the Assembly proposal.